What if I turn this on? Nobody watches. Nobody wants to hear me talk. Nobody wants to see me do this. Like,
Right.
I don't. And that's the reality is that's probably going to be a thing because I'm new to this. There's not going to be a lot of people there. But
Yeah.
that's hard on the psyche in itself when you're like, man, I'm trying to do this to like as an outlet and have fun with it, and it's just kind of hard because like I'm just here by myself and there's only a couple people here. There's nobody talking to me. Do they even like what I'm doing? So you go through all these things, and you go through those things every time before you go live. You're like, man, is this gonna be successful? Like, am I gonna make it doing this? Is this gonna is somebody gonna enjoy this? And I personally haven't found the exact the equation or the process like we were talking about to convert from like being a soldier and doing high violence stuff and shooting guns and how I can apply that in this walk of life where it's just literally talking on a camera while playing a video game. So
Yeah.
find that
Well,
lens.
let's delve into that just real quickly. So nobody, as far as I know, can just step out and be the best possible person at anything. And if there is a person like that, they're gifted. They've just got something. They fell into something. They walked into something. They just had the circumstances were just right.
Right.
Just like for instance, if this was the first stream you ever did, and you somehow grasp on to 10,000 people that were viewing it,
Yeah.
wow, like something happened. That's awesome. But usually that's not how it works. Just like when you probably first went to the range, you were probably trying to put some rounds down range, and you probably missed a lot.
Yeah.
And if you had that approach of like, I have to shoot expert my first time, well, sorry about your luck. That's highly unlikely.
Right.
So it's about expectations and being realistic. But if your approach is more about, hey, I'm just going to try this, and it's almost like a curious mentality of like, what can I learn by trying this? What can I get better at by trying this? And so while you may not have 10,000 followers on your first stream, you might get 4, and you might find that you can keep 4 for a full stream.
Right.
And that's pretty impressive of itself. So then you can go back and say, well, what did I do that kept these people engaged for 4 minutes, or for four people engaged this whole time? Because being a new person, being a novel or a novice to something, you're gonna need to figure things out as you go along. And so if your approach is curious, if you're open, you're okay with failing, you're okay with experimenting, that's okay. That's a learner mentality, and that's probably what you're gonna need versus this idea of like, I have to try and compete with these people that have been streaming for years. And I would guarantee that a lot of those people that have those high volume, viewers probably at some point say, I have to be doing something to keep them engaged, and that's an outcome focus. And they might they might actually be doing this. They might be saying, while they're playing, saying, what do I need to be doing right now to win this game? What do I need to be doing right now to win this round? And all the while, doing that is actually keeping people watching because they want to see what they're doing. So if I'm focused on how to play the game and I'm doing it really well, people are going to want to see that. If I'm focused on trying to keep people on my stream, and that's my sole focus, I'm not paying attention to how to play the game. And so I might mess up, and because I messed up a number of times, these people are like, well, I don't want to watch him. He's not teaching me anything.
Right.
So there you lose your viewers. But if you're always focused on process, but aware of people watching you, that you value the opportunity to learn, to get better, to give yourself the opportunity to fail and learn from failure, you're probably going to eventually, as you do more reps, you're going to be having more people watch, have more people stay connected, more people wanting to reach out and find out what you're doing, how you're doing things, etc. And that's just from a standpoint of just trying to do what is in front of you and what's most important in the moment. That's very task focused.
Right. And I think one of the challenges with that is just since we're on the subject, and I know that this will apply to a lot of small streamers, is one, you and I have talked at length before, is negative self-talk. You have a lot of that. Like, I do it still myself. Like, man, why am I not, the best at something? Why is everything that I do, it just doesn't seem like I'm the best, or the things that I thought I was the best at, didn't come to fruition or ended for some reason. And then you go into a new venture like streaming, which is a very high anxiety type thing, whether people believe it or not, because it does take a lot of work and does take a lot of charisma to do. And you think, like, I'm not good at this either. And one of the hardest things that I've seen from other people and I've related to is, like, people say you have to talk like you're getting viewed by 100,000 viewers every time you stream, and in the reality, that's just not, it's not realistic, because it's very hard to sit here knowing that you're live and you can see, and you can turn it off at the top, right? You can turn off how many viewers you have, but at the end of the day, like, it's hard for people to just talk like they're talking to a lot of people when they're really not, because one thing that I like to do when I go to other streamers pages and stuff, I go in their chat and I talk with people in their chat and get people talking about stuff, so that the streamer can look over in their chat like, oh yeah, I saw that movie, or yeah, I think that too, and then they have something to go off rather than just trying to come up with stuff to talk about, right? Like, I'm playing a game, I'm focusing on the game, I'm trying to be really good at this game, so people will watch me because I'm playing this game, which is very hard. So I have to focus on that. And then I have to focus, like, oh, am I keeping these people attention? Like, there's 5 people in here and nobody's saying anything, nobody's chatting, nobody's commenting, like, what, So those are some challenges that I see that are very common amongst, like, the small streamer community, and I think it's important for people to understand how they can do better at that, myself included.
Yeah, well, I think again that approach again, it gets into perceiving, or just, like, your evaluation of what the situation is. And first of all, like, there's a lot of people believe in this idea of multitasking.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, part of my job is to debunk that myth, in the fact that there is no such thing as multitasking, and multitasking being that you can be applying the same amount of attention and do the same kind of quality job between 2 different tasks, perhaps unrelated tasks. What you can tend to do, what people think is multitasking, are like well-learned behaviors. So, like, for instance, I can walk and chew gum. Yeah, it's because you can walk, that's something you've been doing for years, and you can chew gum because it's something you've been doing for years. So yeah, that doesn't take up much attentional resources. But if it was to play a video game and engage in a conversation, those are 2 different unrelated activities that require different amounts of attention and different types of attention. And so it's very difficult for you to be able to do those 2 things at once, because the second that you start to shift towards the conversation, you're not focusing on the game, or the second that you start to focus on the game, you're not involved in the conversation. So the idea is, you need to be able to figure out how to shift your attention between 2 different things and shift quickly. And that's basically what attention control is the ability to apply your attention on the thing that you want it to be on, in the amount that you want it to be there, for the amount of time that needs to be there. And so with a conversation, it might be read a word or 2, process that as you're watching the game, and then you need to, it's going to take time. Again, you have to be able to work through it, understand it's not always going to work. You might have to get really good at just shifting your attention and coming back. Even if you have to practice it, even if it's playing a game and having a sticky note over here and just shifting, reading, coming back, shifting, reading, coming back, like just practicing shifting your attention in some form or another, so that you can not do 2 things at once, but so you can attend to 2 things at once, and making sure that you're not sacrificing your attentional focus on the game, because I'm going to guess that the conversation in the stream is not as important as playing the game. Again, I don't know, because I'm not a streamer, but when you're talking about doing 2 different things that require different attentional amounts, or amounts of attention, it can be really challenging. And unless you're trying and practicing and failing, you won't figure out how to do that best for you. And yours, Brian, will be different than what mine would be. Like, your strategy, your system would be different than mine. And that's okay. We would just have to figure out what that is and work through that. And you manipulate the way that you need to figure out how to do what you need to do.
Yeah, and again, like you said, it differs from person to person, and some people are really good at this, and we shifted from military to, like, the streaming thing, which I kind of wanted to do, and we can come back to the military stuff for the military people that will be viewing this, and I do have some regular military gentlemen and women that view the stream pretty regularly, so they'd probably be interested in that. But there's some people that are just really good at it, because the thing with streaming, there's a multitude of people that watch streams. There's a multitude of people that are streaming, right? My favorite streamer, Zach Lane, Z Laner. He plays Call of Duty mainly. So he's really good with engagement with his chat, but he's also insanely good at the game. Like, there's not many people that are better than him at the game, right? So, and even he started off small, playing Fortnite and like one of those smaller games. Well, it wasn't a smaller game, but like with a smaller following, right? And it just took one moment for him to run into a famous dude in the game, and he beat the dude in the game in a 1v1 situation. And then next thing you know, he's getting blown up, and like, oh, well, that dude killed me. He's pretty good. And then they start engaging, and then further down the line, this guy Z-Laner, he sent a highlight reel video to one of the other big streamers on Call of Duty. He's seen it, and like, this dude, it's Doc Disrespect. For people that don't, everybody that's regularly viewing me knows who it is, but for you, it's basically one of the biggest streamers ever, right? He's big name, and like, he plays with professional athletes all the time on game, blah blah blah. And next thing you know, this guy Z-Laner's playing with Dr. Disrespect regularly, and he blows up. But it took that like one moment, right, to run into somebody that had more of a reach than he did, and to prove himself, and then he blew up. And so for me, right, I play a game that you don't really run into people like that anymore, because I don't play Call of Duty anymore, right? I play a different game. Mm-hmm. But some people that watch a stream, they want to see somebody that's really good at it. Others want to come and chat, and they feel like they want to be a part of it. And so you can't ever predict which one of those people are in your chat, right? You don't know if they're there for the gameplay. You don't know if they're there to talk to. So you got to try to balance the two. But again, when there's nobody there, if there's nobody there talking to you through like the text, on my chat screen, you're like, okay, well, maybe they're just wanting to watch the gameplay, and I don't want to exasperate myself like talking and blabbing like we are on a podcast, while playing the game. Yeah. Maybe they just want to watch me play and not hear me talk at all. Maybe they don't like the sound of my voice. Maybe they don't like my big ass nose, Like, who knows? Yeah. You don't know. But yeah, some people have it, and some people just don't, and it's you can't really tell which one of those two people you are until you decide to either keep going or give up, right?
Yeah, and I mean, going back to the conversation about being on the range and such, if your focus is on who's watching and what they're doing, then you're not focusing on playing your game. So it's just being accepting of what the situation is, and just trying to do your best in whatever is meaningful for you in that moment. So if you're trying to engage with people in your conversation, you're not really focused on your your play, fine. Like, okay, there might be days, maybe that's something you could do. You could practice like one day, like saying, what, today I'm going to sacrifice my gaming to work on interacting, or today I'm not going to focus on interacting, I'm going to focus on getting my game done. Because to be honest, all the people you're talking about, I'm willing to bet that they are so experienced in playing the game that it can be something like walking and chewing gum at the same time, because it's like second nature. It's been something that they've practiced for hours upon hours upon hours. Say the 10,000 hour rule, because that's not really a thing. It's more about like the amount of time they put into their practice and the quality of the practice they put in. So like, if it's maybe they've only been playing for 6,000 hours, but it's been real high quality play.
Right.
That's the difference between. It's not just if I do, the 10,000 hour rule is not if I just play for 10,000 hours, I'll be an expert. That's not the case. It's the quality of the time spent in practice. That's the thing. So a person could technically spend, less time than what is advertised out there in popular culture of the 10,000 hours. They could put 3,000 hours in, and if it's high quality play and high quality training, they might be as good as a person that's done 10,000 hours. We just don't know. So It's all about the quality and the effort put into the practice.
Yeah, because I mean, if you start talking about quality over quantity, and we'll just say esports, because esports is getting huge, right? It grew immensely last year because of COVID. So there's a
Hmm.
like it's starting to become an overpopulated market, because a lot of people are switching to streaming. Um,
Yep.
and it's at this point, if you're not like, whether my stream goes anywhere or not, I made a comment in a video I made for somebody else earlier. Like, I don't really care to be a big streamer, right? Like, I'm doing this as a hobby right now. If it becomes a means, when it comes to monetary, okay, that would be outstanding, because then I can just focus on being with my daughter and everything back home in Ohio, and do this as my job, because military benefits and stuff that I will be, you know, blessed with when I get out. That'd be awesome. But it's not necessarily my goal. Obviously, I mean, it's hard to say, because you could say it's a goal because you don't ever do anything just to like do it, right? There's a purpose behind it, and
Sure.
my purpose was like, I play video games all the damn time anyway. Maybe somebody else wants to watch me play video games when they're bored at work or whatever. Um, but at this point in like streaming esports, it's like trying to get into the NFL, trying to get into Major League Baseball, trying to get the NHL, because they are looked at as professional athletes in their own realm. Like these big names in Call of Duty. Like Call of Duty is the main game right now that I choose not to play anymore. Um, but those people are looked to as like the professional athletes. So
Hmm.
it could be just as hard becoming a big time streamer that it is to get into the NFL Combine.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at just sheer numbers, I don't know the numbers in terms of, you know, um, professional gamers and whatnot, but if we look at athletes in the NFL, there are what 100 and some odd Division 1 football programs, and so when you think about every so many years, um, you might have what 100 and some out of those 100 teams, and those teams consist of roughly maybe 100 players. So there's maybe a pool of like what 100,000 players, maybe a little less than that,
Right?
that
Yeah.
are possibly able to be eligible for a draft, right?
Yeah.
That's Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. There's it's the number's not very big, but it is when you consider that many athletes. Like 100,000 athletes is a lot. But when you think about the fact that they draft so many players out of that, and the draft goes for a couple rounds, and you have undrafted people and all that, like when you think about how many people actually have a career that actually do well in the NFL, the number is something like less than 5,000 players in the history of the NFL have played longer than 5 years. That is ridiculous. Considering that when you look at a team, there's 32 teams, and there's like, what, 50 guys on a roster roughly? Maybe a little more than that, considering like guys that are like reserve players, if they're reserve players or not.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a large amount of people that have the opportunity to get to that point, and then when you think about how many actually get there, there's a reason why players get beyond 5 years, or they don't get beyond 5 years. They either have it or they don't. They either have injuries, or they couldn't maintain it. They weren't consistent enough. The lifestyle wasn't right for them. They lost interest. Who knows? But when you talk about streaming, you just need internet connection, the game, a TV, and the console. And I'm willing to bet that it's, 4, 5, 6 times as many people playing the games as it would be that are athletes. And so, yeah, I mean, your numbers are already small, like in terms of making it somewhere. That doesn't mean that you can't try to get there. It doesn't
Right.
mean you can't work every time to try to do the things that are going to get you there. And that's where dedication and commitment come in. Because in the days that you don't have a lot of people watching you, it's not motivation that keeps you playing, it's commitment, it's dedication, right? That's where people will get kind of caught up in like, oh, I'm not motivated to play because there's not enough people playing. Well, guess what? Then you're probably not going to make it. But if you're committed to your craft and committed to getting better, it doesn't matter who's watching you, because you're just worried about doing your game right, playing your game right, doing your thing. But if you're worried about people, and people, whether they're there or not, is what's influencing you as to how hard you're going to put your time into, playing the game, you're probably not going to get very far. Because stepping out of the world and getting into the athletic world, your Tom Brady's, your Peyton Manning's, all your elite athletes, those guys, on their days off, are doing things related to sport. And if they're not, they're taking care of themselves and they're taking a break. But more often than not, they're living that. They're making sacrifices for that. They're not going to their kids' things. They're not going to family events at times. They're having to sacrifice going to bed early to get up for early workouts. Their the life of a professional athlete isn't always as glamorous as it's made out to be. Like, sure, you get paid a lot of money, but a lot of that money gets reinvested into taking care of yourself.
Right.
And so, think about gaming. You got to be doing your stuff. You got to be practicing your craft and being okay with, like, some days you're going to be on, some days you're going to be off, some days it's going to be feeling like crap. But those are the days you still show up anyways. You still work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes hand in hand with what you said. Like, even like I have the function on here, for you not familiar, is stars. Stars is like the way people tip you money, right? That's how one of the ways that streamers make money is through tips. And then subscribers, which it's going to be a long time before I get subscribers, because you have to meet certain stipulations in order to get to that point. And then you can run ads, right? You can run ads once you have like 10,000 followers, which I have 166 followers, right? So long haul before I can run ads and get money off of ads from Facebook. But I've made some money, right, through donations and tips, through people that support me day in, day out. They come here and they'll give me stars and stuff. But that's zero money to me, right? That's either going right back into making my rig a better setup, getting more things to make the stream better, my computer better, or it's me spending money to market, or not even, I won't even say market, just to understand what the struggle's like being a small streamer and going to other small streamers that may not be having a good time on stream and going in there and giving them the money that somebody else gave me and kind of paying it forward. Like, not to like, hey, I know it's like, I'm in your stream, I'm a streamer, but more just like, hey man, I know the grind sucks sometimes, or I know that this can be strenuous, so I figured to stop in and drop you some stars. So it's the same thing, like when you said like the money that you make doesn't necessarily always go right back to you. Like I'm probably negative dollars when it comes to streaming, because if you take into account all the stuff I had to pay for to get this up and running, right?
Right.
So that's just and again, that's another anxiety piece, right? Like, you're like, I'm losing money doing this right now, right? I'm losing money, like.
Well, here's something to consider, that it's slowly making waves in the athletic world, but it could definitely make its way in the esport world. The concept of competition, right? Competition has this idea: it's me versus you. Like, I'm trying to beat you. The difference is, and this goes back to an approach. If my approach is that I have to beat people, then I kind of see it as like an all or nothing situation. But if I look at somebody and say, wow, that person beat me and I want to learn from them, suddenly now competing against somebody is going to raise your level, because you're going to try to figure out how to beat them. You're going to try to figure out, what are they doing that I'm not doing? How can I get better at that? Right? And then, if the attitude of the group is, I'm not competing against you, but when you get better, I have to raise my game to get better to beat you.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, you raise your game to beat me, and then I raise my game to beat you. Suddenly, on a level playing field, we are just kind of raising the bar for each other, and our level of play is getting higher and higher and higher, as opposed to just, let me decimate you, and rub your nose in it, and move on to the next thing. So this is a very different approach, where if you're working with a team, and I know streamers aren't in teams all the time, but if I have this approach of, like, anybody I stream against or I play against, I can learn from them. And when I learn from them, I'm going to get better. And then, therefore, the next time I play with them or play against them, they're going to be better than they were the first time, and the second time, and the third time, and the fourth time, the fifth time, whatever. And just the more interactions you have, the better quality of play you're going to get, as long as you're willing to learn from it. If you're always kind of looking at, oh, man, I lost, and again, that's an outcome focus. But if your focus is process and learning, hey, you might be a small-time streamer, but 2 years from now, if you stay dedicated and committed, you might be more of a pretty good-sized streamer, because now you've taken your knocks, you've learned, you've gotten better. People know that you're getting better. People are watching, they're tuning in, because now you're starting to be more competitive and you're starting to beat some pretty big-name people. And it's only because your approach has been, I don't care who I'm playing against, I can still learn from them. Every time I play, I can learn something new and figure out something that I can do differently, and it becomes less of a threat to your ego and to your your identity of losing. Like, and let's be honest, your gamer tags can very easily be recorded. People can know exactly who you are and how much of a jerk or how much of a nice person you are.
Mm-hmm.
And in the game of life, yeah, sure, the a-holes tend to get far first, but they tend to fall off because what they do is they tend to, either um, hurt or take advantage of people around them, and suddenly nobody else wants to be around them because they've kind of expended all their resources around them.
Mm-hmm.
So now there's no one to pull from anymore because they've been taking. Whereas a person who's been giving, a person who's been um, paying into, now has suddenly an access or a wealth of resources to pull from that now is not seen as, oh, here's Brian taking advantage of me. It's like, no, here's Brian. Like, here's John. And like, I'm willing to help and support Brian because I know Brian. Brian's a good dude versus, the guy who comes in here and, takes stuff, is a jerk, whatever. Like, I'll know that because it's not hard to know these gamer tags. It's very easy, as a matter of fact, with the internet. You can just make a website, gamertagsthatarelosers.com. Boom, there you go. Make a list of it, and it's suddenly published for everybody to see.
Yep.
And it's very simple then because I can go and read that. I wouldn't know anything about this, but I say, oh, that person's name, that person's mean, so I'm not going to bother with them.
Right.
But if it's like, these dudes are stand up. These are the guys that you want to hang out with. These are guys that you want to stream with. These guys are cool. They'll talk to you about anything. They'll chat with you. You can ask questions of them. That's going to pay off more. People are going to want to be around that.
Yeah, and I think that's with you just having the wealth of knowledge that you have in this realm because we are still in the realm of mental health, mental skills, and all that, and that goes right hand in hand with human interaction. Obviously, like we spoke earlier,
Yeah.
they're not only in streaming because that's how I've kind of looked at streaming, right? Because I've started streaming around the same time as a couple of my buddies, and we support each other. We'll stream, we'll play games with each other and try to help each other out. We show up in each other's chats, send stars back and forth, do all that stuff. And then there's other dudes that started streaming that I kind of know, but I don't know them on a personal level. Started at the same time as me, doing much better, have much more followers, much more people viewing them, and at for you like, man, what that sucks, but it's more like what can I replicate or not rip off, but how can I be more like that without changing who I am? Because that's another dilemma, right? I'm not a happy-go-lucky person.
Yeah.
You know that. I'm not bubbly and all other stuff, and I'm not gonna fake being all giddy. I am who I am. I'm kind of rough around the edges, and I get mad at things. But that's me. I'm a human being. So maybe there's people that relate to exactly how I am, and that's what draws them in. Because like, oh, this guy's a regular ass dude. He gets mad at shit just like I do. He's not, because you don't want to be fake. Even on this platform, right? Where you could potentially have hundreds of people seeing you. And I think people in society along the same lines need to have the same, like, I guess, outlook is like, instead of like, oh, that guy has much better life, I'm going to say something terrible and mean about that person because it makes me feel better in the moment to put them down. Instead of like, I really value that guy's principles and that morals. Maybe I have a talk with that guy or that gal and like just understand who they are and where they come from and how I can potentially replicate that to better myself so I can feel like that. Instead of, you get, especially internet, especially streaming, people coming in people's chats and accusing them of cheating and, you're a piece of shit. This is an R-rated stream, by the way. Yeah, coming in and just being just bad people for no reason because it makes them feel better in the moment. And I think as a society we need to come away from it because we're going to down a dark path with everybody trying to be better than everybody or trying to put somebody down or just making people feel bad for no reason. And I not something I really vibe with.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at just how humans interact, when you go to a Starbucks, and I know Starbucks has this happen all the time, and somebody has bought the drink for the person behind them, what do you typically say? Like, damn, that person's a sucker?
Right.
Typically, no. You're like, oh, wow, thank you. Like,
Yeah.
that was really kind. And you feel and you feel more apt to say, you know what, I'm going to buy the person behind me's next, or the person behind me's drink because this was afforded to me. And
Exactly.
so when people say things like, oh, nice guys finish last, and being a nice person, no, it's actually, if when you look at it in real life, when good things happen to you and they're unexpected good things, the human nature, or the nature of humans, tends to be, let me kind of push that forward a little bit. Let
Yeah.
me try to continue this, because, and it's almost like you understand, like you realize how grateful you are that somebody had this thought to think of you in that moment, saying, wow, they don't know me, but they're willing to do this for me.
Yeah.
And therefore, let me kind of pay this for the next person. I don't really know them, but because it was afforded to me, I'll do the same thing. And there's stories of like Starbucks that have had that happen, where it's gone to like the hundreds, where people have, the first person said, you know what, let me buy the drink for the person behind me. I want to buy their drinks there. And it has continued for like up to like 133 customers,
That's
which is
awesome.
amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And when you think about that, kindness, compassion, empathy, gratitude, those are all real positive emotions that people think are, oh, that's kind of soft. I don't want to talk about that. That's kind of weird. Well, really, there's a lot of power behind it, because it helps us do things that we never really realized we're capable of doing. Um, Gratitude especially is a really good way to manage and reduce stress. Thinking of things you're grateful for, identifying things you're grateful for. That's something that you can do to really help with this. So when you think about this whole idea of streaming and the culture of giving things away, and like being kind and starting conversations with other people's streams, if that's authentic to you, authenticity is huge. And when you talk about authenticity, if I have to put up a front and then also pay attention to a game, then also interact, that's a lot of energy.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
I just show up as me and do these things that I know give me good feelings, I'm going to be better for it. And at the end of the day, like, if you feel better for having done something for somebody, that's entirely you. And you should be okay. So I say, shoot, you should, but that is you're allowed to feel that way, because
Hmm.
you're living authentically to who you want to be and who you really see yourself as. And I know you and I've had this conversation, people thinking, oh, well, you're a sucker or you're taking advantage of. Not if you're acting in alignment with what you value
Hmm.
and who
Yep.
you want to be as a person.
We've talked about that in
That's not the
length.
case at all.
Yep.
Somebody might think that you're getting taken advantage of. That's them. But if you know why you did it, and you're like deep down okay with that, then that's authenticity. That's accepting of yourself, and that's like the best form of like self-esteem and self-confidence you can really get, is that internal, like, I know why I did this and I know who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. And to start to round off, I want exactly what you said when it comes to when we talk about emotion, and that's who you are. And you and I have talked about that over the years plenty of times, of like, man, like I feel like I'm being taken advantage of, but you say no, like that's just who I am as a person. So there's no reason I should feel the type of way, because that's just who I am. They're not taking advantage of me because I wanted to do that thing, right? And what I want to challenge
Right.
people with, that not everybody potentially have experience, and I'll get a little personal, and we went down this road before, but for the people that may be listening or watching, you don't know how valuable your good emotions are until you don't have them. Um, from my
Mhm.
deployment, why I suffer from like anger and depression, and when I get depressed or I get into a high stress, and sometimes I don't know how to cope with my emotions, it's because I spent an extended period of time in another country, thousands away from my family, where I could only have ugly emotions because that's what I needed to survive. Like, not like just get, no, to survive, to make sure I don't, lose my life, happy, content, and warm. And those are not feelings that get you through war. For those that people don't know, you don't use those to get through war. The only sense of like compassion that will get you through war is your compassion for the person to your left or your right, that their life, even though you don't want to die, obviously, you would put your life down on the ground in front of them and take a bullet for that person, just because you both chose to do something together that, for a greater cause. So for those, when you get depressed and everything, and it comes to pay it forward, you don't know what it's like, if you don't know what it's like to not have those good emotions. It's going to be really hard for you, um, to be that good person, because it's a very bizarre feeling when you every time you get upset or every time things get stressful, your good emotions start shutting off, where you feel like you don't have them anymore and you go numb because you relate it to, wow, last time I was this stressed out, I was getting shot at every day. I was getting blown up. I was almost losing my life. I was almost losing my buddies. And so what did I do for 6 or 7 months? I shut those emotions off because I could get you killed, right? So I relate that to when I get really stressed out, my emotions start going off and I don't know how to generally interact with other people. And I had to sit down and have a conversation with my wife and tell her why I may be acting like this way. Like, I had to sit back and reflect, like, why am I feeling this way? And I had to do some deep thinking. Oh, that's right. Because I spent half of a year without emotions except ugly ones. So I just want people to know that, like, try having no good emotions and then being depressed at the same time, and just know that people have experienced that, and it's a hard thing to recover from, but you can get over it, right?
Well, I would like to push on that slightly, only because what I want people to walk away from in this conversation would be emotions are emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the point I want to make for you, Brian, and for people that are listening is that when we start to get into a point of labeling emotions as good and bad, it can lead to the fact that we don't want to experience bad emotions and we always want to experience good emotions. And so in a really deeper sense, that goes to, I don't want to feel sad because sad is a bad emotion.
Right.
Or I want to feel happy a lot because happy is a good emotion. Really, what I think you're talking about is emotional intelligence and knowing that in an environment. I'm not speaking from experience. I'm speaking from hearing what you're saying. Being in a combat zone, happiness, joy, um, what else might be there? Satisfaction. It might not be a productive emotion for you to have because that tends to be one of comfort. And if you're on patrol at 6 o'clock in the morning and you have to be vigilant for IEDs and insurgents and all that kind of stuff, being in a comfortable emotional state is not going to be productive for you. And you'll figure that out right away.
Yep.
You'll figure it out when you're kind of thinking about something that's not related to what you're doing, and next thing you know, shot goes across the bow and you're like, you get snap out of it like, holy crap, what just happened? Whereas stepping out in a state of anger, state of frustration, a state of vigilance is gonna be more productive in terms of what it does for you. So if I'm angry, I actually can pay attention to things better. I can actually be a better judge of some things. And so emotions can be positive in terms of like how they make us feel, and we like that feeling. But if we are labeling them as positive and bad, then we are going to put ourselves in a situation of like, oh, I don't want to feel those bad emotions. I want to feel those good emotions. But if we just say emotions can be productive and unproductive, we can say there's a time when anger is productive and a time where anger is unproductive. There's a time when happiness is productive and times when happiness is unproductive. We need to be able to figure out what emotional state we're in and then figure out how that we can manage that emotion so that it's productive for us. So going back to what you're talking about, absolutely, when you're in a combat zone and you realize that you need to be, maybe you're angry and angry helps you be productive and you can channel that anger and it shows up for you, your body can get to that point really quickly, especially if it's in that environment more often than not. If the same triggers are there, if the same behaviors are there, if the threats are still around, like you're in a threat state and your body figures out real quick how you need to survive in that. So I think you're making a really good point talking about less about good and bad emotions, more about just emotions and being in tune with your emotions and not rejecting them, but accepting them for what they are and then figuring out how to manage those emotions that are perhaps unproductive in those moments and then how to manage them when they are in those productive moments. I think that's kind of what you were saying there, as opposed to, because I don't want you saying that like you don't want to feel anger when you're playing a game, because maybe anger makes you play the game better.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think it's real. I think it's a really good example that you're talking about there, and you're probably right. Like the fact that you probably function really highly in the environment overseas, when you're deployed in an angry state, probably is the reason why you can get there so quickly, because you know it works for you, number one, and you've been there, so you know, like how to get there pretty quickly.
Right. Exactly. Because let's face it. Violence requires hate. Violence requires discontent. Violence requires anger. And if you're in a situation where you could potentially take another person, another human living person's life, unless you're something like you're serial killer or something, like, you're not going to generally be happy about it. Like, you're not going to use happiness to do that, right? Um, Even though it's them or you, even though they've committed atrocities against us or whatever, you might, like, if they maimed or they hurt somebody that you loved, and you take their life in that situation because that's the nature of the military and that's the nature of war. I don't. Some people argue that, yeah, you feel happy because that you did that. Maybe it's a relief knowing that, like, that dude, he's no longer gonna hurt anybody, type of thing. But what I found, and obviously emotional intelligence, like you said, in that moment, talking about what emotions it required to survive, it's obviously made me feel hot, made me start working up those emotions, and that's where you come in and be like, okay, I know what you mean, because you and I have talked about this plenty of times. So again, I appreciate you bringing it down to a different lens or a different way of saying it. But emotional intelligence, one thing that I really urge people to do, and I still suck at doing this every now and then, is one thing that helped me get over that when I started to get depressed, or my PTSD is always really bad in the summer, because that's when everything went down, was in the summer. So naturally, I know going to the summer this year, around the June, July time frame, I'm going to start getting a little moody, but I can feel that going on and know, okay, I know why this is happening. I'm priming myself for it to happen. What do I do to make sure it doesn't escalate? What do I need to do to make sure that it doesn't happen again? And I had to do. Nobody taught me that, right? At some point you have to figure it out for yourself, and you have to come to that realization yourself, because you just don't like being ugly. If, like, you know what I mean? When it comes to those emotions, they're ugly. In that moment, doesn't mean that you shouldn't feel that way. It doesn't mean you shouldn't feel sad. Doesn't mean you shouldn't feel anger. All those emotions are necessary in this life. All emotions are man, woman, black, white, purple, green, red, blue. All those emotions are very, very normal, and they should definitely be used. Just knowing when to use them and which ones are appropriate at the time. And you know what? If you're sitting here, and I, like, for right now, we're talking about this conversation where, like, 2 hours or so. John, you're my brother, man. I love you to death. I can't thank you enough for doing this. Me, man to man,
Yeah, of course, man.
live on, it could be like, oh, people might think like, oh, these guys are softies. But you don't know what that's going to do for the other person, regardless. So I urge people, if you have that positive, good thought for somebody that you're looking at, or somebody that has affected your life in a certain way, just say it. Because that's emotional intelligence. Yeah. That's being emotional aware, being like, hey, this is kind of like oh no, I'm a guy, I shouldn't be being mushy and soft like this. And like, my wife is the best thing that ever happened to me. Tell her that. Because you don't know what that's going to do for that person's, day. And in turn can affect you and have you're having a great day because you made somebody else feel good. So I urge people to try that out, really. If suck up the pride, suck down the ego, and just tell somebody you love them. You don't know what it's going to do for that person.
Yeah, I mean, to add on to that, I'll admit I have not been, and at least not in my past, really good at expressing emotions, and even knowing what my emotions are. Like, I'm still in a process of understanding my emotions and things like that. The thing that I really want to make sure that people kind of understand is that emotions are information. They are providing you information about what you're processing, and what's happening around you, what's happening inside of you, and so there is a certain amount of like openness that it is recommended to have in order to be emotionally intelligent. Like, just because you feel sad doesn't mean that you're not allowed to feel sad. Like, you're allowed to feel the emotion that you feel. Like if it's happening for you, it's real. That's your emotion. That's yours. And the piece that gets really hard, especially like as males, is this idea that guys can't show emotion. That's the gender norm. Like
Right.
guys are supposed to be hard. Oh, you're not supposed to cry and this and that. Well, wait a minute. We might be guys, but we're also humans, and humans are designed to have emotions. And that's like the experience of life is the whole spectrum of emotions make life worth living. I mean, you don't imagine if you went through your whole life just feeling happy. That'd be great. But you don't really realize how great happiness is until you've been sad. You don't really realize how great it is to feel calm unless you've been angry and frustrated. You don't really know how, you know, good it feels to feel content unless you've been, absolutely just, unsatisfied. So the reason why emotions exist is to provide us information, and the best thing about it is that we can leverage them. And so exactly what you're talking about, we can use how we feel to deepen relationships. So yeah, Brian, like with you, I love you, dude, because you have made my life, easier in terms of like you made work for me easier. You got me in with groups. You had me talking the right talk. You had me doing the right things. You had me providing information that people like me when I was working for the military never really got a chance to know or to have. Or you just kind of helped me, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then the other piece of it is just because the word love is perceived to be something in movies doesn't mean it's the same thing in real life. Like it's really about you take care of people, you do things for them, and you appreciate them for who they are and what they do for you. So yeah, open up, share your emotions, be willing to experience the whole spectrum, and be willing to sit with the uncomfortable ones.
Right.
Because the more you sit with them, the less power in terms of the influence they have over you. Like you just get a chance to know this is me sad. This is what I do. Okay, cool. So if this is what I do, now I'm not afraid to feel sad, but I know I can still do something when I'm feeling sad. I can still do my job. I can still whatever. It doesn't get in the way of me being what I want to do or what I want to be and who I want to, who I want to be for that day. So if I have to be a, friend and something bad happens to me and I'm sad, well, what happens then if, you know, a friend of mine reaches out and something happened to like their parents or whatever, and suddenly now they're sad?
Right.
Is my sad supersede theirs? Well, no. I can acknowledge mine and also acknowledge theirs, and
Mm.
I can try to comfort them and relate to them because I know what my experience is like. But if I don't know what my experience is like, it's hard for me to connect and to relate.
Yeah, absolutely. And like growth comes from being uncomfortable, right? You don't grow when you're comfortable. You know, those things that make you uncomfortable make you reach into different depths of your psyche and your emotions and figure out, hey, I don't really know how to handle this situation. Let me try something. Oh, that worked. Imagine if I was able to apply this in this situation in my past, how much more successful I've been. Well, I know now, so I can do it in the future. But yeah, it's very very much so look past when it comes to the emotional spectrum of just interactions and where the stigmas are, and that's a whole conversation you could have for another 2 hours just on stigmas through the country of like how people are supposed to act and be, and this book says that you need to look like this and feel like this, and that's not necessarily true because every single person is built differently. And the whole love and opening up to people, and that's not always easy. It's again, it makes you uncomfortable sometimes if you're not used to it. Me and you talked at lengths. You moved in with me at probably one of the worst times of my life, right? I was at a very low point. Just went through a divorce, and getting kicked out of the job that I wanted to do, and I was at my lowest point. But you were there, right? You were there, and you helped me get through that, and we grew together, and we both learned from each other, and that was a genuine human connection that was beneficial for both of us. There was reciprocity there, and we both built each other up, and that's why we're able to just pick up the phone after not talking in months and be like, hey man, and it's like nothing ever changed, right? Because we connected on more than just a face-to-face level. We connected like mentally, like we connected emotionally. You were in the hospital when I was sitting there feeling like I was dying, almost. I mean, I was kind of dying when I collapsed that lung. Like, You know, that was one of the worst times. All that happened. I got divorced. I lost my job. I didn't know what I was doing, and then next thing you know, I freaking got a collapsed lung, and I'm sitting in the hospital, freaking getting tubes stuck in me.
Mm-hmm.
And who did I have there?
Yeah.
I had you. You know, and then my mom came down and stuff. But at the moment, if you weren't there, I would have been the most alone I would ever be in my entire life, and that's not any feeling that somebody wants to look forward to or even experience, right? So,
Yeah.
I guess the point there being is like, it may not always be convenient to be there for somebody, but I urge people to just be that outlet. You know, maybe you're sad, that person's sad, be sad together, and figuring out how you guys can get out of that sad moment, even if they're different, or you're sad for this reason, I'm sad for this reason. Figure out how you can get through it together, because um, holding somebody's hand through some of those dark times is probably the most um, rewarding feelings that you could have. That you know that you needed help, somebody was there to help you, and that was okay that you needed help, and that person thought that it was okay to have help. You know, nobody should ever feel like they're a burden on somebody, um, and people shouldn't feel like they have to do anything by themselves. I've lost more friends to, the suicide realm of things coming back from deployments than I did while I was deployed. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a whole different story in itself, in the failures in the mental health system, not only in the military but in this country as a whole, because we don't have enough systems in place for true mental health. So that's why I want to do this podcast with you, have this little talk, because you and I are on the same page of that. And maybe even if there was only a total of 6 viewers at the peak of this video, maybe one of those 6 people, they got something on this and they thought, hey, those guys, they seem like, pretty normal, straightforward guys. They said that it's okay to have emotions. Just do it, just open up. And maybe that helps that person get through a tough time. And that's all we can really do, right, in the society and the way things are.
Yeah. In a sense, the way that you kind of attack the stigma around mental health and talking about, um, or is getting the conversation started. Really, is the stigma behind mental health and talking about your feelings, and it's okay to not feel okay and all that. It really just starts with having conversations and talking about it. And
Yep.
even if it's 2 guys talking on a podcast on a Sunday night and it's 5 people that are going to watch it, that's 5 more people that at least heard it somewhere, someplace, and it has now kind of at least maybe resonated a little bit, or it's not so unfamiliar. But the other piece of it, I think you're talking about is you you're ultimately the reason why you can or can't do something in terms of giving yourself permission to feel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as much as society might say something, as much as you might not believe that it's okay to feel emotions, it's when you give yourself permission to feel those feelings that some of this emotional weight gets taken off.
One closing statement, one closing paragraph to leave with somebody that might get them. What would it be? In your words, what would you leave the people that viewed this with?
Well, I think we talked about a lot, and if you're trying to map it all out, it probably looked pretty scattered in terms of how we jumped around and whatnot. But I think the important thing for me to convey to everybody else is that um, you have the ability to use your brain to work for you and to help you with what you're doing. And it's not always ideal to like leave things to chance. And so the work that I do is all about training your mind. And many people are familiar with training their bodies and training for their jobs. So there's a guy out there, Michael Gervais, talks about you can train your body, you can train your craft, and you can train your mind. And so my thing would be just being an advocate for trying to find ways to deliberately train your mind, figuring out ways in which you can figure out how to be more self-aware on certain things, start to think about self-regulation, how to regulate your emotions, how to regulate your thoughts in terms of you know um, maybe not necessarily thought stopping, but just being more deliberate about paying attention to what's happening, and trying to apply your mind to different things and trying to find different ways to train it, because those are all things that are going to be helpful, because eventually you're going to get into a situation where stress is going to be involved, and you're not going to be able to train for that physically, but you are able to train for it mentally by getting some coping skills. So figuring out ways in which you can start to think about training your mind, being interested in training your mind, seeking out those resources, I think would be really good.
Absolutely. Connect your mind, connect your body, connect your emotions. Try to figure out how all those pieces go together, and I think you'd be surprised with the kind of person you could become when you actually focus on those things.
Mm-hmm.
So for that, I think we can end there. To everybody watching, if you guys are interested in this, you'd like to see more, just let us know, and we'll potentially set up some more around the same realm of things. This is a very deep and winding path when it comes to mental health and mental skills, and there's a lot to be said. So if you guys were interested in this, thanks for listening. John, we appreciate you being on here. Look forward to doing this again, and hopefully see you guys in the next one. But all right, John, I'll catch everybody.
Yep. Yep. See you, bud.